You walk into a tavern in England in 1340 and sit down to eat. There is no plate in front of you. There is no fork. There is no napkin. What sits in front of you is a thick slab of dark bread, dense, slightly stale, deliberately cut flat. This is what you will eat your food off of. When the meal is done, you will eat this too. And if you cannot finish it, someone outside the door will. Look around the room. One pot hangs over the fire. It has been simmering since Monday. Today is Thursday. There is no roasted boar, no goblets of wine, no gleaming feast spread across a long table. What you think you know about medieval food came from movies. The truth is stranger than that, dirtier than that, and in some ways, smarter than anything you have ever seen on a screen. By the end of this video, you will never look at a plate of food the same way again. And there is one detail, something so disgusting about how medieval meat was handled that historians rarely say out loud. We are going to say it plainly. That is coming. The bread that was your plate. The slab of bread in front of you has a name. It is called a trencher. It is not made from wheat. Wheat is expensive. Wheat is for people above your station. This bread is made from rye and barley, darker, denser, gray-brown in color, flecked with visible bran. It was baked yesterday, not today, because a fresh loaf would collapse under the weight of hot food. You need the bread to be firm. You need it to function. The tavern keeper sets the trencher flat in front of you. Food will be piled directly on top of it. The bread absorbs everything. The drippings, the grease, the broth, the sauce. Every drop of everything that lands on it gets soaked in slowly over the course of the meal, until by the time the food is gone, the bread itself is heavy and saturated and warm with flavor. Then you eat it. This is not poverty. Stop thinking of it as poverty. This is engineering. In a world with no disposable dishes, no ceramics for everyone, no way to wash plates easily, the trencher solves every problem at once. It holds the food, it absorbs the waste, it provides additional calories, and when you are done with it, nothing is wasted. In wealthier households, a servant collects the soaked trenchers in a large basket after the meal. The poor wait at the door outside. They receive the bread, juice-logged, still warm, tasting of everything that has been sitting on it. This is not charity as an afterthought. This is the food chain closing itself. The plate is the meal, and the meal feeds someone twice. Now, look at that pot over the fire. The pot that never empties. The pot has been cooking since Monday. It is now Thursday, not the same meal, the same pot. Every morning something new goes in. Dried peas from 2 days ago have broken apart and thickened the liquid into something heavy and dark. Turnips added yesterday are still holding their shape but have gone soft at the edges. Leeks and onions put in this morning are releasing their sharpness into the broth, making the whole room smell of something sharp and warm. This is pottage. For roughly 80% of England in 1340, this is dinner. Not a side dish, not a starter. This is the meal every jour d'épi, repeated across weeks and months with small variations depending on what is available and what season it is. Some days it is thin enough to drink directly from the bowl. Other days it sets firm enough to slice when it cools. Today it sits somewhere in between, thick and clinging, requiring a spoon and some effort. The base is always legumes, dried peas or beans, stored in sacks through winter, swelling slowly in the pot over hours, turning the liquid from water into something substantial. Around them go whatever vegetables are on hand. Parsnips, turnips, cabbage when available, onions always. The onions are not a flavoring. They are a structural component. They are what makes the pottage taste like food rather than warm water. Herbs go in by the handful. Parsley, sage, thyme, hyssop, grown in the kitchen garden, added without measurement because everyone who cooks in 1340 already knows how much to use. You use enough to taste them. That is the measurement. And somewhere in that pot, there is probably a bone. A ham bone, or a piece of salted pork, or a chunk of bacon so heavily preserved that it has been soaking in water since yesterday just to make it edible. The meat is not portioned out to you. You do not receive a piece of it. What you receive is the pottage, and the pottage has been in contact with meat, and that is as close as most people in England get to eating flesh on an ordinary day. This pot will not be emptied tonight. It will not be cleaned and started fresh tomorrow. Emptying it would waste fuel. Restarting it from scratch would take hours. The pot is maintained, replenished, perpetual. It is the center of the household's daily food life. And in this tavern, it has fed dozens of people today already. You're about to dip your bread into the same vessel as a stranger. You are about to eat from a pot that has been cooking for 4 days. And you are about to discover that none of this is the worst thing about medieval food. The meat is. The meat that was already dead for weeks. Here is the detail that historians do not say plainly enough. When medieval English people ate meat in 1340, they were almost always eating an animal that had been dead for weeks, sometimes months. Not because they were careless, not because they did not know any better, because they had no choice. Refrigeration did not exist. Animals were slaughtered in autumn. When feed became scarce and temperatures dropped, the meat was immediately salted, smoked, or dried, transformed from a perishable resource into something that could survive until spring. The salt content required to preserve meat in this period was extraordinary. A piece of salted pork or beef had to be soaked in fresh water for hours before cooking, sometimes overnight, just to pull enough salt out of it to make it edible. Even after soaking, the meat was intense, aggressive, one-dimensional in flavor. This is what most people in England were eating as their protein source. Salted pork and bacon were the backbone, not eaten as a centerpiece, used as a seasoning. A piece of bacon thrown into the pottage pot flavored everything around it for 2 days before the flavor was fully extracted and the meat itself was discarded or given away. You did not eat the bacon. You ate what the bacon had done to everything else. Fresh meat was a calculation, not a routine. Animals were too valuable to slaughter casually. A cow produced milk. A chicken laid eggs. You did not kill something you could use alive. You killed it when keeping it alive cost more than its value, or when a feast day demanded it, or when an animal was sick and needed to be dealt with quickly. And when an animal was sick and needed to be dealt with quickly, that meat went to the poorest tables. Everyone knew. Nobody had a better option. Below the salted pork and the sick animals, there was one protein source that held the whole system together, and it was herring. Barrels and barrels and barrels of herring, salted, dried, stacked in wooden casks, transported inland from coastal towns. Astonishingly cheap, monotonously ubiquitous, required by the church in a Catholic England. Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, all of Lent, and all of Advent were fish days. That was roughly a third of the entire year during which the eating of meat was forbidden. Herring met that demand because it was plentiful, it was durable, and it needed no refrigeration. It was eaten constantly. It was pulled from the barrel and chewed as it was. It was soaked and cooked with onions to make it marginally less relentless. Contemporary accounts describe the tedium of it with a frankness that makes clear how deeply it was resented. But it kept people alive. And in 1340, keeping people alive was the entire point of food. Drop a comment right now. If you had to eat medieval food for 1 week, what would you miss most from your modern kitchen? And tell us where in the world you are watching from. We love seeing where our audience comes from. People join us from everywhere, and every location surprises us. Now, there is a myth about medieval food that has been repeated so many times it has started to feel like fact. Medieval food was bland. It was not. This myth exists because Victorian writers misread medieval recipes, because people assume that simple ingredients mean simple flavor, because the idea of people in the past eating tasteless food fits a comfortable story about progress. The reality is the opposite. Sit in this tavern in 1340 and taste the pottage. It is not bland. It is sharp. It is aggressive. It hits you before you have fully brought the spoon to your mouth. Mustard is ground fresh. Mustard seeds crushed with verjuice into a thick paste spread directly onto meat and bread. It does not sit quietly in the background. It cuts through the fat of the salted pork. It wakes up the boiled chicken. It is not a condiment in the modern sense. It is a tool. You use it because without it, the preserved meat is barely edible. Verjuice is everywhere. The acidic juice of unripe grapes or crab apples, used exactly as lemon juice would be used today, splashed over cooked dishes to add brightness, mixed into sauces to cut richness. Every heavy dish has something acidic in it to balance what the fat and the salt are doing. Onions, garlic, and leeks appear in nearly every savory preparation, not as background notes, in quantities that would seem aggressive by modern standards. The flavor trinity of medieval English cooking, not exotic, not imported, but used with intention and skill. Herbs go in by the handful, not the pinch. And then there are the spices: pepper, cinnamon, cloves, ginger. These are expensive. These are imports from trade routes that stretch to the other side of the world. In a wealthy household, a spice cabinet is displayed the way art is displayed today, as evidence of purchasing power as proof of connections, as a public statement about where the household sits in the social order. Common people are not using these spices, but common people are not eating flavorless food. They are eating food built from what is locally available, used with real intention, in a flavor profile that is herb-forward and acidic and pungent in ways that a modern palate would find unfamiliar but not unpleasant. The skill required to make salted herring edible 3 times a week, to make dried peas and turnips taste like something a person would voluntarily eat again, is genuine culinary knowledge. The medieval cook was not ignorant of flavor. They were operating under constraints that modern cooks never face, and they were managing those constraints with tools we have largely forgotten. The ale in your cup is weak. It is cloudy. It is slightly sweet and slightly sour and not entirely pleasant. You drink it anyway. Everyone in this room drinks it. Men, women, children. Not because ale is pleasurable in 1340, though it can be, but because it is necessary. Water makes people sick. No one in England in 1340 understands the biological reason for this. They have no concept of bacteria, no germ theory, no understanding of contamination. But they have observed the pattern across generations. People who drink from rivers and public wells get sick at a rate that people who drink fermented liquid do not. The conclusion is logical. Fermented liquid is safer, so everyone drinks ale. This is not modern beer. The alcohol content is roughly 2 to 3%, weak enough that a person could drink it throughout the day without becoming incapacitated. There are no hops yet. The liquid is unfiltered, grainy, almost like drinking a very thin porridge. It goes sour within days, which means production never stops. The alewife, almost always a woman, brews fresh batches every few days and signals availability by hanging a pole or a branch of greenery outside her door. The tavern fills. The cycle repeats. Wine exists in England in 1340, but it is geographically limited to areas near trade routes. Where it is available, it arrives rough, acidic, often cut with water or sweetened with honey to make it drinkable. Mead, fermented honey and water, appears in rural areas but is less common now than it was a century ago. Ale is the universal drink because it is local, cheap, and produced everywhere by people who have been doing it their whole lives. While you have been eating, something has been happening around you that is not about food at all. The pilgrim at the next table is traveling to Canterbury. He came through 3 towns yesterday. He has news from the south, which roads are passable, which towns have sickness, where grain is available, and at what price. This information exists nowhere else. There are no newspapers. There is no postal system for ordinary people. There is no central record of anything that does not happen in writing, and most of the people in this room cannot read. The tavern is where information lives. The wool merchant by the fire knows which roads to the north are flooded this week. He hired 2 laborers this morning at the table you are sitting at now. The transaction was witnessed by the people around them. It is as legally binding as anything that happens in a courthouse because for most people in England in 1340, this is the courthouse. Disputes are settled here. Debts are negotiated here. Oaths are sworn in front of witnesses over bowls of pottage. A mason looking for work stands near the fire and waits for someone to ask. A merchant needs someone to move goods. He asks the room. Traveling friars stop to preach to whoever is eating. Parish business is conducted between the ale and the trencher. Songs fill the gaps between conversations. Stories are told and retold until they become something between news and myth. You did not come here just to eat. You came because this is the only public space that exists for you. The market requires money to participate. The church requires observance. The tavern requires only the price of a bowl of pottage and a cup of ale. And in return, you have access to everything that holds this community together. The shared pot is not just dinner. It is the entry fee to the only information network available to ordinary people in medieval England. You finish your ale. The tavern is still loud, voices layered over each other, argument, laughter, negotiation, the low hum of people doing the work of being alive together in the same room. You have eaten bread that was your plate, pottage from a pot that has been cooking since Monday, meat that was an animal killed in October and preserved in salt thick enough to cure leather, and ale that exists not because anyone particularly enjoys it, but because the alternative was dysentery. The food brought you here. Everything else kept you. Strip away the trenchers and the barrels of herring. Strip away the perpetual pot and the mustard ground fresh that morning, and the ale that tastes like thin porridge. And what remains is something that has not changed in 700 years. Coming in from the cold, sitting down, having something warm placed in front of you, The brief sensation of being, for a moment, fed and safe and surrounded by other people who are also fed and safe. The medieval tavern goer in 1340 and you reaching for comfort food at the end of a difficult day are separated by 7 centuries of technology, medicine, language, and nearly everything measurable. You understand refrigeration. You understand germ theory. You have options that no person in 1340 could have imagined, but you share the same hunger. And you share the same relief when it is answered. Picture the tavern at dusk, smoky, loud, smelling of ale and onions and wet wool and the faint sweetness of something cooking that has been cooking for days. A traveler sits down, exhausted. Someone slides a bowl across the table toward him. It is just pottage, peas, turnips, a memory of bacon. But it is hot, and in that moment, it is enough. We are not so far from 1340 as we think. The pot is different. The need is identical. If this made medieval England feel closer than it did before, share it with someone who still thinks history is boring. And subscribe so you do not miss the next video, because next time we are going inside the medieval kitchen, the place that produced all of this, and what we found about the people who worked there will stay with you. That video is already waiting.